Hello, everybody. My name's Steve Demig, Python developer. I've done a series of software development videos, and I wanted to go over a gig I recently completed. So I haven't got that many gigs, so I wanted to go over this one. It was with a company called Alphaminr. It was a website called Alphaminr. It's a stock analysis website. Basically, they had an ETL process that was broken and taken an extraordinary amount of time. So I fixed those issues, and I want to show you kind of what I did. So here's what it looks like. It was a Python app with Django as a front end. Let's see, it had like the core of the ETL process that was involved with this was that. It downloads filings from the SEC, so a bunch of different forms that are filed by companies that report on their financial status. Those are downloaded. They're aggregated and processed into a lot of meaningful data that customers can look at, right? So it writes part of them to a relational database. So it downloads the doc via request. It takes Beautiful Soup, a HTML or a parser. It looks at those things and it extracts data. Also inserts different tags into the HTML, and it'll store that modified HTML file into Amazon S3 as a document store. Later on, the front end will come through and access that document through S3, and it'll get the modified tags and everything that are in there that got put in there by the filings processing. Okay. Another part of it is it takes and grabs other financial documents and the ones that the front end looks at, but also others, and it extracts financial data from those, populates different tables in the database, and allows the user via the front end to look at that data as well. So things like shareholder, the director, bios for each director, different things like that. So that stuff is put in there and also accessible for the user. All right, so let's kind of take a look at the website on how it looks. All right, this is it. So we're looking at Apple here. Let's go. I'm going to look at Apple Inc. Okay, so you come up. It's going to give you the first 10K or the latest form that was downloaded from the SEC. And here, this is a 10K form. So it's looking at this. It's got, look at it. It's got all kinds of data in there. It's basically a report that the company does about their finances for a quarter. All right. Okay, so what Alphaminr does is it gives you a table of contents, number one on the side, which was broken, right? So this was coming up with just a bunch of text that didn't even look like a table of contents at all. It was just some raw text that was getting put up there, right? So that whole right side of the UI was broken, this part over here, right? It was not putting out a table of contents. All these buttons were broken, so these are like shortcuts into the document. When we're processing the filing, we insert tags into it, and then this button will access that tag. So it'll take you to the place in the document that the balance sheet exists, that the income statement exists, that the cash flow exists, that the debt statement exists. None of these were working because we weren't processing the HTML correctly, and when we placed it in the S3 bucket, when we got it back out, those anchors, those tags weren't actually in the document, so you wouldn't see anything. These were just, there'd be a button, you click it, and nothing would happen. Also, these guys over here, the top shareholders, you click that, you see them. Okay, you see the summary financials. All right, you see the executives. Yeah, you should see Tim Cook up there. I hope so. Yeah, he's the CEO. You see the directors. It gives you a bio for each director as well. And okay, insider ownership. It'll give you that. Now it also gives you this AI Insights, which it gets a prompt and it'll give you some company or insights in the company for the last 5 years or so. Now I'll also fix this. But the API key I used, I told the client, hey, you got to replace that API key because it's mine. I ended up deleting it. I didn't want it leaked, so it's no longer working and you get an Ajax error, but I did fix that as well. So all this stuff over here was broken too, right? So it was all broken. None of these things work. It gets an Ajax error now because if you look into that error, it's going to be a key error. Basically, the key is not working, the API key. All right, but it actually works. Okay, so let's go back to our slideshow. Oops, that's not the one. That's it. Okay, so basically, this whole the financial data population and the filings processing is done via one cron script, and it was a single-threaded cron script. That, so each filing that it downloaded, it did them one at a time. There was no multiprocessing going on there. It was one at a time. When it got down to the data population, it would grab that data from the S3 bucket and process them one at a time. All this was single-threaded, and it had a lot of, it obviously had errors in it because it wasn't okay, so what was happening was the rendering was not happening correctly because the documents from the SEC were now coming through with a lot more JavaScript in them, and Beautiful Soup couldn't handle that. So what I ended up having to do was stick a step in there in between the request and the Beautiful Soup where I used Playwright. So I took the raw content from the requests, I ran it through Playwright, and then produced the HTML, and then gave the HTML to Beautiful Soup, and then that worked, right? So Beautiful Soup rendered all the Playwright rendered all the JavaScript and gave it to Beautiful Soup. We were now able to use all their existing Beautiful Soup code. We didn't have to rewrite any of that using Playwright. We were able to use all that existing Beautiful Soup code to process just like we were inserting tags, extracting financial data, all that kind of stuff without much modification to the existing code, which was kind of nice. All right. But the problem is, this was a monolithic single-threaded process that was taking about 9 days to complete. I mean, it was never going to catch up the way it was. It just couldn't catch up. It was too slow. So I heavily used multiprocessing to divide each one of these steps up and make them multiprocess. So instead of a single thread reading from the SEC, we now have 10 or 12 or however many processors existed on the host machine. All right, same thing when we're doing transformations and writes to the database when we're doing and reads from the document store. That's now multi-processed, so we get 10 workers instead of just one. So it sped the process up considerably, and I'll show you the results here. So like I said here, the issues were a table of contents generation was broken. None of the shortcut buttons were working. Director and shareholder information was not populating. He said correctly. All this stuff he said was, this sporadically happens, the table of contents. It was happening on every new download. So it wasn't just sporadic. It was all the time. The shortcut buttons weren't functioning. He again said on certain ones. And those were the ones where there was not a new form that had been downloaded in a long time. So those were still working, but anything new was not working. Same thing with all these. Like the director and shareholder information was still there from a long time ago, so it never got overwritten in a lot of cases, but it was not current or correct. So you'd see stuff from 5 years ago when you clicked on it. It was not right? Okay, so cron runtime was approximately 9 days, and it was brittle and fragile as heck. All right, so, okay. So like I said here, at some point, he was not a developer, the client. So at some point, a developer had stuck this table of contents extractor in there, the same code that inserts tags. He had put something in there that basically did nothing. All it did was return the Beautiful Soup, or the HTML from the Beautiful Soup. That's it. It didn't insert any tags. It didn't generate a table of contents or anything. It basically was doing nothing. And that would work in certain cases where the encoding type was ASCII. So when you got an ASCII encoding type, it would work, but you because you would get a table of contents, but you wouldn't get any of the buttons or anything else like that. All right? Okay. So the old extractor, the more complicated one, was still there and it existed, but when I plugged it in, it produced documents that didn't render in a browser, right? So you couldn't click the button and have the 10K or the 10Q come up. Nothing would show up. It would just be blank. All right. So, like I said here, the documents coming from SCC added just a lot more JavaScript embedded, and the beautiful soup's it's an HTML parser. It doesn't render JavaScript. So I use Playwright, which actually does, right? So Playwright would render the JavaScript and produce HTML for me, and then Beautiful Soup has a wonderful time with HTML. It just went to town on that. So all the previously existing HTML or the Beautiful Soup code worked, except I did have to fix a couple of things where it was going off in an endless loop. I modified those so it didn't go off in an endless loop like that. Yes. So like I said, now if I was designing this from scratch here, maybe I wouldn't use Python multiprocessing. I'd use an ETL framework, a pipeline, or data pipeline, because that built-in redundancy or error handling and all that kind of stuff, and it just allows a simpler way of doing these things, than multiprocessing. I basically had to pick and choose areas that could be multiprocessed and add multiprocessing to them. If you really did this from the ground up with the ETL, you'd probably get like a 3-hour runtime rather than 7. It's still going to take a long time regardless, because it's tens of thousands of companies that you're looking at, daily. So yes, and like I said, the ETL processing was split in two as well. The filing part that downloads the new filings, that runs daily and runs in about 20 to 45 minutes. It runs. So depending on how many new filings there are, it'll run in 20 to 45 minutes daily. The financial data population runs once per week. That stuff changes less often, right? The directors aren't going to change daily. You don't have to monitor that daily. You can do that once per week. Generate a new bio once per week. Look at the financials once per week. That's just fine. So that runs once per week. It takes about 7 hours. So compared to 9 days, 7 hours is pretty good. Like I said, I would have liked to get that to 3, but the client just was not willing to pay or do that kind of work, right? He had a hard enough time. I'm embarrassed to say how much I actually got paid for that, because I did a fair amount of work here and I only got paid like $20, right? So look, make sure you're careful, particularly from jobs from India. They'll say like 1,500 INR, that's $20, and you figure they're going to budge on that, right? Because when they figure out what you've done, and see what they've done, they won't. They'll say $20 is it, Yeah. So $20, that's like allowance money from back in the 80s. I'm sorry to say. I didn't like that. But other than that, the guy working with him was great, right? He was a good communicator. The pay was horrible, like I said. And then it was fun to work on the project too. So I'm glad to get a gig in underneath my belt. I was glad to help him. His site is like infinitely better than it was. It was really buggy. So, and that's what I'd like to say about that. Like I said, like I always say, good luck to everybody out there. I hope if you're looking, at me, you can see the kind of work I do. I dig in and I do it, and I'm good at making things faster, more efficient, and more reliable. I'm good at like ETL processes. I'm good at making them, multi-threaded or multi-process, so they don't like single thread and just kill you with time or resources. So thank you for everybody, and goodbye.